Hello, everyone. I'm Nika Durham with NREL's Communications Office, and I want to welcome you all to today's webcast. We're so happy you could join us for this virtual panel featuring women in cybersecurity. Please note that everyone is on listen-only mode and you will not be able to turn on your cameras. Our panelists are here to answer questions through the Q&A chat during today's webcast. Please type your question and one of our speakers will get back with a response. We'll get to as many questions as we can or follow up afterwards if needed. With that, I'll pass the mic over to our moderator, Tammy Reynolds, project manager and lead with NREL's Cybersecurity Evaluation and Application Group.
Welcome, everyone. I'm very excited to be here as the moderator in today's discussion. We have an all-star lineup of NREL women to talk to you about cybersecurity. You'll hear from each panelist about their professional journey, opportunities in the field, and why we all love doing what we do. With that, I'd like to introduce our panelists. With us, we have Laura Leddy, cybersecurity and resilience researcher with NREL's Resilient Science Design and Engineering Group. Lori Hayes, information system security officer with NREL's IT services, as well as the cybersecurity science and simulation group. Sherry Ricardo, NREL's Chief Information Security Officer. Zoe Dormuth, Cybersecurity Research Engineer with NREL's Cybersecurity Science and Simulation Group. And I'm Tammy Reynolds, the Cybersecurity Project Manager and Lead here at the lab. Now, before I turn it over to the panelists, I'll share a little bit about myself and my journey to NREL. Originally, I'm a business major, and in no way did I ever think that I would become a researcher in cybersecurity. Early in my career at NREL, one of the associate lab directors decided to start a cybersecurity research program at NREL. And he came to me and actually asked if I would mind helping start that center. And so I was enthusiastic about it and thought it was a great idea that NREL definitely should start considering cybersecurity on renewable energy. And so started helping build out that program, which is now the ESR Center. So super excited to be here today to discuss, obviously, with these women, some of the great accomplishments that they've done and what I've got to be a part of as well, and the cybersecurity work that we get to do here at NREL. So enough about me. Let's hear from our speakers today. I'd like to give everyone on the call an opportunity to share your story and how you got involved in cybersecurity. So today we'll go ahead and start with Sherry. Sherry, would you like to share a little bit about your journey?
Sure. So my journey in cybersecurity started many years ago. I started out at IBM. And when I first started my career journey in technology, it was not in cybersecurity at all. I actually started as a technical writer, and I was assigned to a server support team to create all their policies and procedures. And at the time, that team did a lot of different functions. Security was just one of them, but we were in charge of uptime, capacity, all of the other things that you associate with maintaining infrastructure. And I was part of an outsourcing department, so we had many different clients from financial sector, control sector, from critical infrastructure, I guess it would be the control sector, including a transportation company, some banks, insurance companies, and things like that. So we had a lot of different things that we had to learn and do. My journey from there into security came about when we started investigating what our corporate policies, procedures were and how we were to follow them. How does that compare to what our clients' policies, procedures are, and what did we need to do? We also struggled a lot because in the earlier days of cybersecurity, like 2004-ish, most of your security needs were taken care of by your system administrators, and they were the ones that would investigate and try to understand what was happening when something went wrong. And so a big part of our job became, well, I'm not sure why we keep getting reinfected with this virus, or I'm not sure why this system keeps getting knocked offline. So it was really just a see a need, fill a need type of role. And from there, it just transitioned into, hey, we need somebody to do security full time, and no one raised their hand. So I got to be me. I sort of fell into the profession and I've really enjoyed it ever since. Before coming to NREL, I worked for RTD, Denver's public transportation company. They had no security program when I started, so I built their program for 6 years. And then I came here to NREL to work on our program. So I feel very blessed to be part of a population of people who care so deeply about security.
Great. Thank you so much, Sherry. We're so glad to have you. Laura, would you like to go next?
Yeah, thanks, Tammy. So I entered the cyber world pretty recently and from more of a policy perspective. Before joining NREL last June, I was in graduate school studying international affairs, and I became really interested in climate and energy security. So thinking about how climate change and energy infrastructure impact US national security. And I learned how important cyber is to energy security. Energy companies face cyber risk from a range of vulnerabilities related to their IT systems, OT infrastructure, and supply chain partners. I also learned how important the energy sector is because it provides an enabling function across practically all US infrastructure sectors, everything from transportation to public health. So all of this is to say I got into cybersecurity from a national security policy angle, thinking about questions like, how can the US military better meet adversaries where they are in cyberspace instead of waiting for attacks to occur? Is there a way to better allocate federal resources to meet the growing demand for robust cyber defenses? And how can we define and promote cyber resilience among both public and private entities, especially thinking through how much the private sector owns of our critical energy infrastructure? So definitely came in with the policy angle, but during my time at NREL, I've been here about 10 months, I've gotten to engage from a more technical angle as well. So thinking about, how can we build cybersecurity into the future grid as we build the grid itself? And this has definitely been challenging, but also super enlightening. I know that I definitely still have a lot to learn, but I'm looking forward to doing so. And I'm really glad to be here and engaged in this work as well.
Great. Thank you so much, Laura. Zoe, would you like to go next?
Thanks, Tammy. Hi. So my journey in cybersecurity began in college. So I went to college for computer engineering, and my first internship, I was lucky enough to get started in cybersecurity. So I interviewed for the position and they asked me some questions and I'm like, I don't know how to do that. And luckily they were like, great, you can learn. So I had a good experience at my first internship doing malware analysis. I had a book and a mentor, and that summer was a huge learning experience. And what I really discovered through my college experience and the internship was cybersecurity is related to everything I'm learning in my coursework. So being able to understand the system and the different parts of the system, how they all work together, is a critical part of cybersecurity. So everything I learned and was learning through internships in school and networking and just from talking to everyone had all tied to cybersecurity, which I really like. So I continued through multiple internships doing software and hardware security. So I got experience in all of those realms and really like the diversity of this field and where you can work. And that's what I like a lot about NREL is you have the opportunity to really work on huge ICS systems or concentrate on IT security and focus on more of the computer side and networking and that kind of thing. So it's been a great journey and I'm excited to keep going.
Great. Thank you so much, Zoe. Lori, would you go next?
Thank you, Tammy. I'm honored to be here with this panel of women that are so versed in cybersecurity. However, since I do things a little bit different, I'm going to start where I'm at right now, and then we'll look back on how I made that climb. First of all, I am the ISSO for the Cybersecurity Science and Simulation group. That part of my job allows me to interact with researchers, and these researchers have built these 3D visualizations where we can look at different towns, homes, that kind of thing, and launch attacks against them, and we can see what the effects and the impacts are for the threat. So I feel like we're really making an impact with this kind of activity. The other part that I will see during the day is working with compliance. Now, people usually think security and compliance is the same, but it's not. Compliance is more like understanding laws and requirements in order to secure protection. And I work with Sherry on that. And Sherry, I'm glad you are a text editor. Now I'm going to send all my papers to you. So if we go back to 12 years, because 12 years is how long I've wanted to work at NREL, I started my career with a glass of champagne. I was at home one night, it was midnight, I was all by myself, and I was just about to sip from the glass, and the factory that I worked at called me. So of course I had to answer, I had to put the glass of champagne down, and I was logging onto my computer, which allowed me to also log into the factory, made the changes, got them running again, and then had this light bulb moment. Hey, if I can do this, then anybody in the world can do this. Industrial control systems are pretty much the same between system to system. So I was intrigued at this point at all the different ways that industrial control systems could be compromised. And I wanted to learn more about that and how I could work effectively in that area. Why? Because working in an industrial control system is very different from working in like an IT environment. If you do the wrong thing in a control system, then it could stop the control system, but I digress. I started working with GE on their cybersecurity project. They made turbines for electrical power generation. And I was able to grow in my understanding of what it takes to secure a device like that. Again, if you do the wrong thing, then something could blow up or somebody could get hurt. After working with GE for several years, I actually took a break. Cybersecurity can be very heavy, and it's important to have that work-life balance. But when I came back, I was a private security consultant, and then I was able to work with different vendors and different operators of power plants, water plants, those kind of critical infrastructure areas, and look at a real-time basis on attacks and what havoc it created in the plant. And so I decided, okay, this is it. This is what I'm going to do. So I started reading, I got some certifications, and it was just kind of a self-taught course then. And then I discovered being part of a professional group was really important. So I started with the ICS-JWG, Industrial Control Systems Joint Working Group, say that 3 times. And I was able to network and communicate with other stakeholders, FBI, DHS, that kind of group. And we were able to look at threats and how we wanted to protect control systems from those threats. And I find that one of my most valuable careers. But right after that, I got the call for NREL. And I said, yes, I wanted to work for 10 years. This is great. I'm coming on board. So that's my story.
Wow, what fascinating stories. Thank you everyone so much for sharing. We could probably go on for hours just learning about, what we've all done in this field and all of our experiences. But let's get to the next questions. So the first question is for Sherry. Sherry, given your extensive background and experience in the field, how has the landscape changed in cybersecurity? What evolutions have you seen?
Well, I think a couple of core evolutions. Like I mentioned when I was talking about how I became a part of the field, cybersecurity used to not really be known as cybersecurity. It used to just sort of be like a thing that you could do, like, hey, look, I did this weird thing with this computer. Okay, it's really disrupting our business. How do we prevent that from happening again? And then as the field evolved, it turned into more information security. So people being concerned about where their information is located, how that information is protected. There were a few disciplines that you could get into. You could, and I've done a lot of them at various times in my career. Like you could be an auditor, you could be a system administrator, you could develop security processes, you could work on backup, you could work on contingency planning, a lot of different areas. But the broadness or the diversity of the field really started to expand after that. It really started to, you could, as a cybersecurity person, specialize in different fields. Like, for example, you could spend your entire career doing penetration testing. You could had specialized teams that were just there for incident response. It wasn't just sort of like, what are we going to do and how do I pull together a team of people? You had people that actually specialize in that discipline. You have people that specialize in understanding how to repair vulnerabilities, how to reverse engineer certain types of malware and so on. So the niches that people could get into and really spend their career going deeply into really started to expand. And you also started to develop, and Lori mentioned this as well, a diversity of thought on whether security and compliance were the same thing. A lot of early security was really focused on compliance. Like, hey, we figured out this thing works. So now if we just make a policy that everybody has to do this thing all the time, it'll solve all of our security problems, right? But I think as the field evolved, as people's understanding of the field evolved, what they found is that that's good to a certain extent, but it doesn't actually fix all of your problems. You really have to look at things from a risk-based perspective, like, and rely on training people, getting people to understand whether they're making good decisions, what a good decision is in context, in the context of your system, in the context of what you're trying to do, and how to act upon that. So security and compliance really started to diverge at a certain point. And I think a lot of companies, businesses, government agencies are all working hard on how do you develop a risk-based approach while still meeting all of those old compliance requirements, because they didn't go away. You still have to comply with the law, you still have to comply with policies, but you have to do it smartly and you have to do it more flexibly. And so that's something that I have really seen evolve. And throughout different disciplines in my career, whether I was being a system administrator working on the engineering side, or whether I was working in the compliance side or the management side, questions seem to have followed the discipline. How do you appropriately manage your cybersecurity risk? And what resources do you need to do it? And how do you determine what's appropriate and tolerable for your business, as well as at the same time meet the requirements of the law? So it's become infinitely more complex in a nutshell.
Thank you so much, Sherry. That's such great insight for everyone listening to get a sense of what it's like to work in IT and in cyber. I love how you talked about the risk-based approach and how we really need to, you know, you're only good as your weakest link, right? In the human component is definitely that factor where training and making sure that staff is up to date on all of their training. So everybody listening, right? Make sure that you're up to date on your training. I know that we had Cybersecurity Awareness Month. I can't even remember which month that was, but it was recently, and we
October.
should all be up to, October.
Yeah.
Was it?
Yes.
It feels like just a month ago, but apparently was several months ago. But yeah, I mean, you know, we got to make sure that we're all taking the necessary steps to keep our organization secure. So, thank you, Sherry. We're so you know, excited to have you as our CISO, and thank you for sharing with us today.
Thank you, Tammy.
So next question is for Zoe. Zoe, what advice do you have for women just getting into the field of cyber, or what do you wish you had known when you got started?
That's a great question. And I really, I really like this question because I've had so many mentors through my career and through school that really helped me navigate this field, especially as a woman, where there's not too many of us in this field. So I would say when you're presented an opportunity, no matter if you think you're going to like it or not, try it out. Always try out things that are presented to you, or do that internship and see how you like it, because you never know what you're going to like. You never know what you're going to love. And it can lead you to different opportunities. So just have an open mind when navigating that field. And talk to people, ask questions. I experienced imposter syndrome quite a lot throughout my journey, and sometimes I still do. But this is such a huge field, and nobody knows everything. So ask questions. Don't be afraid. The more you ask, the more you learn. YouTube is a great resource. There's a lot of training videos out there that if you ever had a question about a concept, you can always just watch a 5-minute video on it and gain some insight. So keep curious, keep passionate, don't be afraid to take opportunities, and use your resources as an advantage, and really make sure you're talking to people and keep learning, I would say.
You did that so eloquently. Great job. Thank you so much, Zoe. That's great advice for everyone that's listening and getting started in their careers. I too had that same experience, you know, just trying to dive in and try and soak in as much information. I can remember sitting in meetings at NREL. I would get invited to these meetings with my bosses and stuff, and not knowing very much about cybersecurity, and just sitting there listening. And most of the stuff absolutely went over my head. But the more and more that I sat there, the more I started learning about what they were talking about. And then now I sit in any meeting and I know exactly what's going on, and I know, and so before you know it, you're one of the people that they're looking to have help make decisions for projects, think of new projects, think of new innovations. It's a pretty cool deal. So thank you for sharing that. And it's actually an excellent segue into our next question, which is about mentorship. So, and that question is for Lori. Lori, what is the importance of mentorship and community in this field?
Tammy, I'm so excited to talk about mentoring. It's a great way to give back to what you have been given in this field. And I have to say, questions, always ask questions. That's the only way you're going to find things out. And sometimes I feel like the questions I'm asking are not relative enough. And usually there's about 10 people on the meeting that don't know what it's meant anyway. So you're helping everybody else. And about helping everybody else, I've always found that teaching someone is the real way to learn something. Then you find out what you don't know. And as I mentioned before, I'm very technically curious. I've read a lot of information. I've, like I said, I've gotten some certificates, but it was talking and networking that really started me thinking about giving back as far as mentoring about cybersecurity. I started cybersecurity when the tools we use on an everyday basis are now being used by adversaries. So while I think that, there are programs and degrees, I believe they complement the experiences that we've all had that have grown up with the cybersecurity aspects. I can bring to mentoring most of my experiences that I have had through time, and I'm able to shed a little bit of light on what might be in a course, what might be in a degree, because that helps the depth of the person that is trying to learn about cybersecurity. And so I'm a huge believer in mentoring. I enjoy seeing people learn and hearing the right questions that are asked and help me learn as well through mentoring.
Great, Lori, thank you so much. And I couldn't agree more. I think that, we always have to remain teachable, right? But that we learn so much ourselves when we're willing to give back, what we've learned in return. So thank you for sharing on that. The next question is on the importance of cybersecurity across disciplines. And as our resilience representative on the panel, this question is for Laura. So Laura, cybersecurity goes beyond the tech world. What are some other disciplines or other lines of work where cybersecurity is becoming a more integral part of that work?
Yeah, so like I mentioned earlier, I think energy is one of the most pivotal sectors for cybersecurity, which is part of the reason why I think NREL has become such a leader in this space. And this is especially the case as we move toward a more modern grid. This is going to be a more decentralized digital grid with two-way power flow. And this transformation of our grid into a more interactive system introduces additional complexity, especially as power operations also become more reliant on communications infrastructure. So I think what we're seeing is more interdependencies between critical infrastructure sectors, which does make cyber more of a priority through those interconnections. So number one, I would say energy security. Number two, I would say national security more broadly. The Biden administration has made cyber a top priority. Concerns here do include malicious cyber activity and attacks on critical infrastructure. So I think that is related to energy security. We're also worried about things like cyber theft of intellectual property in science and technology fields. So geopolitics is definitely an important part of the cybersecurity equation. And I think we're seeing more sustained attention to this from a national security point of view. And finally, I would say resilience is a discipline where cybersecurity is becoming much more integral. At NREL, we define resilience as a system's ability to prepare for and recover from disruptive events. This is definitely a rapidly growing research area for us, especially in the Energy Security and Resilience Center. And one thing my resilience group is actively working on is how to better integrate physical resilience. So thinking about resilience against things like natural disasters with cyber resilience. So thinking about how we build security into our systems from the ground up. And there's a lot that systems need to be resilient against these days. And cyber attacks are definitely included in this threat landscape and are becoming more part of the resilience conversation. So to quickly sum up, I would say 3 disciplines where we're seeing cyber become more integral outside of the tech world are energy security, national security, and resilience.
Awesome insight, Laura. I really appreciate that perspective and reminder of the impact that cybersecurity has across all sectors. It's really exciting and important. And this field is it's such an amazing field to be in. So this next question is actually for everyone. What is a favorite cybersecurity project that you have got to participate in or lead? And we'll go back to Sherry. Sherry, we'll start with you.
There's been a lot of different projects, and I have to say that my favorite projects are usually the projects that I also hate the most because they're so challenging. I like projects that involve getting a lot of people pointed in the same direction to accomplish a thing that ends successfully. And that by any stretch is always difficult, number one. So I guess if I had to pick one among all of those projects that I thought was fruitful, that I thought was fun and interesting, it probably would be working with our partners at Idaho National Lab. It was prior to my joining up with NREL, to perform a assessment, architectural assessment of Denver's light rail system. That was one of my favorite projects. It was also one of my most challenging projects. And some of it was because it was technically challenging, understanding the control system, how the control system works, understanding how the block scheduling works for trains, how the system, relay systems and so on work along tracks. So the technical understanding of that, understanding railroading concepts, which date back to the 1800s, and how those are still applied, even with the technical control system on top of them, was really interesting. But the most interesting and challenging part of it was, when I worked there, I worked in the IT department. And I needed to work with people who are not in the IT department, that were in the OT department. There were 2 different departments. And there was a lot of tension between those groups. And every time I would come over to talk with the OT team, they'd say, "But Sherry, you're here to take over our operations." And I say, "No, I'm not. I'm here to help you understand what's important about your operations so that the IT team can help you, or that you can help the IT team understand how not to be disruptive towards you." So it was really like, so I found that my role as a cybersecurity person there was a lot about getting things done. It was about doing the assessment. It was about the technical work. But moreover, It was about being that bridge between those two departments and getting them to find common ground that helped us to be successful in making those security changes that we identified or needed to make. And so that was part of the reason why it was my favorite project. It launched a 5-year relationship with our OT department that culminated in some of our OT department members getting their CISSP security certification. So I felt like I won. But I think I won on behalf of the agency, on behalf of making the relationships better. So that's why it's my favorite.
That's great. That's a great story. Zoe, would you like to go next?
Sure. So my favorite project, it is hard to choose. There's been so many really interesting projects, even just at NREL, not even considering my entire career so far. So I do have one that I'm currently working on. So I am the cybersecurity lead for a wind energy infrastructure security project. So what we're doing is we're partnering with the wind side of NREL, the cyber and wind side, and we talk to wind energy industry stakeholders. So we talk to them and we collaborate and ask them, what are you most concerned of about wind energy security? So it's been a really cool project just because of the collaboration across different sectors and industry, as well as other national labs and DOE. And it's pretty cool because my favorite part of cybersecurity is how broad it is with different systems, so it can apply to literally anything. So looking at wind turbines and in that infrastructure and these huge machines, and understanding the security that goes behind these this critical infrastructure is really fascinating. And I get to learn a lot about OT security and how are we securing our wind turbines and relating that to new technology as well. And how do we incorporate new technology into legacy systems or future designs of wind turbines? So it's been a really interesting project, and I've definitely learned a lot. And we have lots of work to be done. So it's pretty fascinating.
Great. Sounds like a great project. Laura, would you like to go next?
Yeah, so one of my favorite cyber projects at NREL has been the Caribbean Power Sector Cybersecurity Partnership with USAID. And Tammy knows this well because she's the project lead. But one aspect of it has been technical assistance for regional utilities, including facilitating cybersecurity assessments using NREL's Distributed Energy Resource Cybersecurity Framework, or DERCIF tool. And I've just really liked the collaborative element of working with utilities and sort of seeing the cyber progress on the ground. I've also recently gotten to join Tammy in working on the DERCIF tool itself. So that's been a great learning experience as well, just seeing how much work goes into these types of tools. And I'm definitely excited to keep learning and to see what impact that this tool could have moving forward, because I think it's going to be really effective in both domestic and international contexts. So I've really enjoyed that project.
Awesome. Well, we're so glad to have you on both projects.
Thanks, Tammy.
Yeah. Yeah. Lori, would you like to go next?
Yes, absolutely. Let's see, the question is my favorite cyber project I've been participated or led. When I think about this topic, I'm thinking about my introduction was about learning, and then I talked about mentoring. And so my favorite project includes both of those. And I'm working with some fascinating cybersecurity research at NREL, as well as compliance aspects with Sherry. However, those are still developing. My favorite project actually came about because there was a need. I was working in an organization, and I was the only cybersecurity specialist, is what they called me, for a global organization. So you can imagine how much time I spent on the phone, talking to people, writing articles, that kind of thing. And so I decided to think creatively about how can I lessen that load? And I realized some of the IT help desk technicians seem to be interested in cybersecurity. And so I took a lot of the initiative to help them understand what cybersecurity was, filling in that background of they might have a certificate or a degree, but they didn't understand the grassroots. And those were experiences that I helped them with. And soon I found out that I could just give them a ticket. I would work with them with a ticket first, and then I could give them an incident ticket, and they would just take off on their own, and they were interested. And through that process, they then became cybersecurity mentors for the new folks coming on. And so it was really wonderful to watch them grow, not only in competence, but in professionalism, in being able to speak about a topic that they're very passionate about.
Thank you so much, Lori. So I'll just take a minute here to kind of elaborate a little bit on a project, my favorite project, and Laura pretty much just told my whole story. She touched on the DERCIF tool, which is the Distributed Energy Resources Cybersecurity Framework. I was fortunate enough to have proposed that idea to the Federal Energy Management Program, or FEMP, back several years ago now, and was awarded the funding to go ahead and build that project out. And what a journey it's been. Sherry, I couldn't agree with you more on everything that you said, between the blood, sweat, and tears that we put into these projects. And that was my first really big project at NREL, so I didn't know how to, I didn't know what I was getting myself into. I didn't know how it was like building capability. Not only that, but I had been doing cybersecurity assessments based on a couple of different industry well-known frameworks, in the industry, the NIST cybersecurity framework and the DOE C2M2. And so we had been doing those types of assessments here at NREL, and so that's what the DERCIF tool is based on. And so not only taking what I knew, but then learning a lot more and learning how to build a tool, you know what I mean? A software tool, a cloud-based software tool that we house here at NREL, and what that all looks like was extremely challenging, trying to build the tool and do the research basically at the same time. Don't recommend it. If you have any questions on any of that, you can please reach out to me. We can have a talk. But yeah, I mean, the team that I got, though, I was so lucky and fortunate that the people at NREL, like I think that everybody that works here just has such a passion and drive, and that we're all here because we really truly believe in the mission of what we do, right? And what we want to do for this country and the world, right? So it's pretty incredible to be a part of that. I love assessment work. I think it's so, and I'll geek out here for a minute on it, but I love being able to go into a utility, or like Laura was saying, even help another country do an assessment to identify gaps in cybersecurity and help them start figuring out how they're going to mitigate those gaps, and what actions to take next, and talking to leadership teams to start making plans and that kind of stuff. I think it's so I think it's just incredible to be able to be a part of that. From a person that came to NREL with a business background, not knowing anything about cybersecurity, did I ever think that, here I am coming up on my 8-year anniversary, did I ever think that I would be talking about loving doing cybersecurity assessments and building these projects out and doing all this work? I never thought in a million years that I would be in the role that I am today. And it's pretty incredible, but because of wanting to learn and kind of like what we've talked about the whole time today, right? Being willing to learn and wanting to learn and sitting in on meetings, even though meetings and stuff that I didn't even want to be sitting in on, I sat in anyways and listened and learned, and continue to do that, right? So anyways, before we go, I'd like to give each one of these panelists an opportunity to do a parting shot. Any words of inspiration or anything else that you would like to share before we end? like anything that motivates you. What are you excited about in your work at NREL? Why is it an exciting time to be in cybersecurity? And we'll just go in the same order that we did the last time. So Sherry, would you like to?
Sure. If I had to give any kind of parting advice, it would be to not sell yourself short. Everybody has different talents, and not everyone's talents are always technical. It's no secret now that I started out as a technical writer, and I became more technical over time because there were needs that needed to be filled. But I don't necessarily consider myself to be the most talented engineer by any shot that we have here at NREL. I am not even close to the most talented engineers that we have in our ITS department. I like working with people. I like explaining things to people, mentoring them and teaching them. And if I were to say I had one talent that I'm proud of, it's being able to understand and describe something that's technical to someone who is not technical. So know that the field of cybersecurity is broad, and there's a lot of room for people with a lot of different talents. And just because you may not have a technical talent does not mean that there is not a place for you in the field. Cybersecurity requires a diversity of talents, and that's my parting shot.
Great, thank you so much. Zoe?
Yeah, so I guess my parting shot would be keep learning, keep interested, keep passionate about what you're doing, read the news, be aware of what's going on in your surroundings, and just keep learning and learn from others as well as resources that you have available to you, because there's so much that we can do in this world, and even just a little project where we make a difference means a lot. And yeah, stay interested.
Laura?
Yeah, this kind of goes back to what Sherry was saying, but one thing I've learned from my still brief cyber journey is how interdisciplinary field it is. And I guess like you were saying, Tammy, I never thought studying politics and international affairs, I would wind up in cyber, but I got here from a policy angle, and I don't think I'll ever be an engineer, but I'm definitely developing some technical skills. So like Sherry was saying, don't sell yourself short. There's always room to learn. And I think there's a lot of work and research to do, and we need people from all backgrounds to help do it. So it's definitely broader of a space than I used to imagine. I kind of thought cybersecurity was for technical folks only, and like it was just closed to me, but I'm learning that that's not the case. And there's always skills you can learn on the job too. So I think that would be my parting shot. Not to copy what Sherry said, but I agree 100%.
Great. Laura?
Yes. So my parting shot is what my other three panelists have said, but also communication. Something that is needed is more communication in the cyber world. It was difficult for me as first because very few women were in the field, and I found that intimidating. And so that kept me from communicating with my professionals, and actually, you know, I didn't understand it, but I had important things to say, being a mentor or in a meeting or something like that. So communicate, join professional groups, join good professional groups like the ICS JWG is a fantastic group if you're interested in industrial control systems, and there's more groups for just about every aspect of cybersecurity, even politics, which is my favorite. So again, I would urge you to learn, mentor, and communicate.
Great, thank you all. That's such great advice. Okay, I just want to say thank you to everyone for joining the webcast today. We'd love to hear from our listeners with any other questions, your own stories, and if you'd like to learn more about working with NREL, feel free to reach out to us at the URL listed here. Thanks, and have a great day.